This is Pierre Guidi, and he's a beekeeper, and he'll be talking to us about his hives and honey. How many bees do you have when wanting to harvest honey?
Well, each hive has, a healthy hive has about 50,000, 60,000 bees in the spring and summer. Probably half that in the winter, when babies are not being born and that sort of thing. And the reason there are less bees in the winter is the queen actually knows, when there's nectar and pollen in nature. And as the summer goes on, there are less and less flowers in New Jersey, as you may know. And the queen actually decides not to have any more babies until next year. So the population naturally decreases during the winter. So each hive has about 50,000, 60,000 bees.
Okay. How can we benefit health-wise from the bees and honey?
Well, honey is a natural source of carbohydrates. It's sugar, but it's simple sugars. Table sugar is a complex sugar that your body requires some energy to break down and so forth. Honey is fructose and glucose. Glucose is quick energy. Fructose gives you longer-term energy. It's a more natural sugar. Also, honey has some pollen in it, and some other natural vitamins, minerals, that sort of thing. Small amounts.
What is the lifespan of the bees that you collect honey from?
Well, honeybees, the type that we have here in the United States, they're originally from Europe. They're not native to America. And they work during the warm days when there are flowers out. And in New Jersey, unlike Florida, for example, where there's a much longer summertime, a much longer flowering season. In New Jersey, during the spring and summer, workers are expected to live about 6 weeks. They literally work themselves to death. They live to collect pollen and nectar. In the winter, when they're basically inside the hive trying to keep their queen warm during the winter, they live 4, 5, 6 months. Basically, they live through the winter until next spring.
Do you add anything to the honey once you've collected it?
No, not at all. In fact, if you look at honey in the store, you should certainly see on the label the words natural and pure. Unless there are nuts in it or some kind of fruit, it's no longer called honey, it's called a honey spread. But natural pure honey should be exactly what you find in the hive. So the only thing I do is filter it to remove large chunks of wax and that sort of thing that occurs when you're extracting honey. Otherwise, it's pure honey straight out of the hive.
Is it true that if kids eat local honey, it will prevent severe allergies to bees?
Well, that's a million-dollar question. I'm not a doctor. I can't really answer that question. But customers that I have that look for local raw honey, and raw means it hasn't been heated in the extraction process, they claim, many people claim, and many people look for local raw honey because it still contains some pollens that they may be allergic to. And the theory is, and lots of people say it works for them, is that if you take raw honey with some pollens in it, the pollens that they're allergic to, your body may in fact create additional antihistamines, which are chemicals that your body produces to slow down or prevent runny noses, watery eyes, those symptoms that are usually associated with allergies. So lots of people claim it works.
Do you do the bottling and processing all by yourself?
Yes, and it's just me. And in fact, we just visited what I called my honey house. Most beekeepers have a place where they extract honey. And as you notice, it's a fairly clean environment. And the extraction and the bottling takes place there of those honeys that I produce. You can also buy honeys from other people or other places as well, which is what I do as well. When I go to the farm markets with my honey, I also sell other beekeepers' honey as well. And they bottle that.
How many bees will it take to get 1 jar of honey?
Well, that's sort of a million-dollar question. I don't know who did this study, but it tends to make sense. A bee can make maybe 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in her lifetime. And if you multiply how many 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey is there in a pound jar of honey, it probably takes the lifetime of about 1,100 bees.
Oh, okay.
So 1,100 lifetimes
Yeah.
for them to produce one jar of honey. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
To produce a pound of honey, someone figured out that it would take visits to about 250,000 flowers.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
God. How do the bees help other bees and local food supply?
Well, bees, especially in places like New Jersey, are very important to agriculture. Bees are pollinators. There's a great symbiotic relationship between flowering plants and bees. Through the eons, plants have learned how to make nectar and pollen, certainly pollen to cross-pollinate themselves so they can produce seeds, and nectar to actually attract pollinators, and honeybees are pollinators. So there's a great need for pollinators to produce cucumbers, squash, beans, lots of vine crops that grow in New Jersey, as well as fruits. So there are beekeepers whose business it is to actually rent their beehives to farmers, growers, to simply help them pollinate their crops. And according to New Jersey Department of Agriculture statistics, if you have a beehive near your crops, you may get 30% more crop out of your vegetables, for example, or your fruits. And it's fair to say that I have a small garden, and I've seen, since I've gotten my bees, I've seen increased production in my cucumbers and beans, which I grow regularly. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the recent disease that almost killed all the bees?
Well, since 2006 or so, there have been many stories in the press about the plight of honeybees in the United States, in fact, the world over. The press has come up, has fallen in love with a term called colony collapse disorder, but there's actually many problems that bees are having. Colony collapse disorder is a term used to when a beehive simply disappears. It happens, and we don't know why. And the reason we don't know very much why is the hive disappears. It's not like we can diagnose the dead bees if there are dead bees. They just go away. There are many things that have happened to bees in the last 30 years. In the 1980s, way before you were born, something showed up in the United States. It existed in the world called varroa mite. Mites are pests that basically attach themselves to the bodies of bees on the outside, both inside the cell where the larva is growing, as well as adult bees. And they sort of sap the life energy out of bees. Bees are not as energetic, they're sickly, they don't live as long. They form opening wounds on the bee's body, so viruses move in. Viruses such as deformed wing virus. Bees are born where their wings don't work well, or at all, so they can't fly as far. They can't collect as much food. They don't live as long, things like that. And in the past 15 years, there have been horrific pesticides being used in the United States. The kind of pesticides that are called systemics. They become part of the plant. So most corn in New Jersey contains a pesticide generically called nicotinoids. They become part of the plant, and the pesticide comes out in the pollen and so forth, and is spreading throughout lots of plants. The way it works is it affects insects' nervous systems. Honeybees were not targeted, but they're certainly the recipient of this horrible thing that's going on. They can't find their way home, for example. So a combination of all things have made it difficult for bees to survive and have a healthy, productive life. About 80% of the bees in the United States in the wild have disappeared.
Wow.
Luckily in New Jersey we have a very active beekeeper community. So we have thousands of beekeepers. Some have 1 or 2 beehives in their backyard. Some have hundreds of beehives.
Yeah.
And so that's helped out a lot.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it. And it's about noon. The sun is shining, the weather's right, and the bees are fairly happy. What they're doing is leaving the hive, and as you can see them shooting off, they're foraging. meaning they're out collecting nectar and pollen, which is what bees love to do. What's inside this hive is maybe 50,000 bees or so in each of these hives. This is a healthy hive, and what they're doing is collecting nectar and pollen. The nectar they turn into honey. Would you like to know how they do that?
Yeah, how do they do that?
Well, they go out and find flowers, and flowers that make nectar. They take some of the nectar, they actually swallow it and put it in a special stomach, not their normal stomach, and they mix some enzymes with it, and that's what makes it honey, from nectar to honey. When they come back to the hive, they actually share it with someone at the hive, one of the house bees, and the house bees puts it inside beeswax cells. You've seen beeswax, right? Those cells. And there's one queen in here. These bees are all her children, and it's fair to say that most of them, in fact all of them here, are female. All the workers are female.
Oh, wow.
The boys are called drones, and they actually don't do much of anything. They just hang out. So most of the 50,000 bees that are in here, I would say 49,000 of them are actually female workers.
Oh, wow.
And so there are bees inside who are responsible for taking care of the babies, responsible for keeping the house clean. There are guards. There are some guard bees here, so if a strange animal would show up, like another bee from another hive or a wasp, the guards would actually try to defend the hive by attacking whatever's showing up, sending out an alarm, getting all the other bees to help, things like that. So these boxes here, these are called supers. Usually the baby bees live down here, and up here is where the honey is. So when I take honey from the hive, I usually take one of these smaller boxes. All right?
Do the bees from that hive get along with the ones here, or no?
Well, they usually get along. Now, you notice there's not as many bees over here on this hive. You notice the front here?
Yeah.
Is less populated. This is a weaker hive. Now, in the summer, when there's not many flowers in New Jersey, this hive may get so weak that this hive may decide to come over and rob it. So there is robbing going on in New Jersey, and usually in August, July and August, when there's not many flowers out there. Because the goal of all these bees is to collect as much pollen and honey for their winter stores, so they can live through the winter where there's nothing else to eat. So they do get along. You see all these hives here are pretty much together. But if this one gets very weak, it may get attacked. So my job is to try to protect this hive. In fact, you see this piece of metal here?
Yeah.
There's actually other blocks inside where I make the opening small enough where it can be defended by these bees in case they get attacked. Yep. What you see here is, these are called honey supers. These boxes here contain frames like this. I don't know if you can see that, with honeycomb. And honeycomb is used for both babies, so when the queen lays an egg, she lays it in one of these cells, and the babies grow inside the cell. And some other cells inside the hive are relegated to collecting honey and pollen. So these were honey cells, honey frames. And what I did last night, and the reason I did it at night is so the bees wouldn't come after me, during the day I took these boxes filled with honey away from the beehives that you just saw, and I brought them over to what I call my honey house, where I extract the honey. And what I did is I took out all these frames one at a time. These were coated with wax. I removed the coating and then put this in something like a salad spinner. It's called a honey extractor. It spun and all the honey came out.
Wow.
Okay, so what you see here is what's left after I extracted the honey from these frames. And what I did is I put these boxes back here, and what's going on now is the bees are actually cleaning, licking the rest of the honey that's here that I left behind. So they're actually cleaning this equipment for me, bringing whatever honey I left behind back to the hive. So that's all that's going on here. So tonight, after the bees go home, I will actually take these boxes and seal them up and store them for the winter. This is what I call my honey house. It's a funny name, but it's where I extract my honey and bottle it. And it's just a shed, and you can go inside. So it's a small room, and this is called an extractor. Remember I referred to a salad spinner where I put those frames in here? Well, each one of those frames goes inside this machine, and it forms a circle. It's electric. It's got a motor. And what this does is it spins and spins and spins until all the honey comes out of those frames I showed you. And it comes out here. Of course, I have buckets here and so forth to catch the honey. And that's how I extract it. What you see over here is what I did last night. All these buckets are filled with honey that I extracted last night.
Wow.
So each one of these buckets contain about 60 pounds of honey, like 60 jars of honey.
Yeah.
So I have honey here from Hillsborough. This is Hopewell. And I have a bunch of buckets here from Princeton, which is where I have a whole bunch of my bees. So that's it. So what I do is when I bottle it, of course, I have another tank where I pour this honey into a tank, something like this, with a valve, and then I fill the bottles one at a time. And that's what I do here. I'll be doing that in the next couple of days. That's it. Let me close this.
Okay.
If the bees discover